Yes, so for this week's main topic, Inside Out 2 just landed on Disney Plus. Actually, yesterday as we're recording this, it just got there on September 25th. And so we thought this would be a great time to talk about a subject that comes up quite a bit in Pixar movies, those things that tug at our heartstrings, make us laugh, make us have all the feels, those emotional moments within Pixar films, right, Michelle?
Oh, yeah, because they are expert at doing that with us, right? Where they evoke emotions throughout the films. And I think this is going to be fun to talk about.
So we all have some of our favorites, and we are going to list our 5 favorite Pixar emotional moments here. Maybe 5, maybe a few more. We'll see. It is the Hyperion Adventures podcast. Some things may have changed about the opening part of this show, but they probably did not change about how we do our 5 favorite lists. So let's go ahead and get to it. Our 5 favorite emotional Pixar moments. And when we do a list, we always start with Michelle because she's wonderful, amazing, all things great. Look, my list. You can probably predict it from here on out. But Michelle's, it goes left when you think it's going to go right. It goes up when you think it's going to go down. You just can never predict it. That's why it is the best list. So let's get to it. Let's get to the best list, Michelle's list. Michelle, what is your number 5 favorite emotional Pixar moment?
Well, it's funny you say that. And as I'm looking at my list, and it's like, yeah, mine's pretty predictable, I think, this week too. But anyways, my number 5 actually comes from the film WALL-E. And that was when WALL-E was actually being crushed. I'm trying not to give too many spoilers.
There's going to be spoilers in this. These are almost all movies that are older.
Right,
so, yeah.
True. But anyways, there was a scene where he was being crushed, and that really crushed me. And it obviously with their films, it's stuff that builds. These emotions are starting to build, and I could see that in reflecting on it for today's episode. It's like, first you had the emotions when Wally was taking care of Eve on Earth, when she was in that shutdown mode. There were so many really adorable scenes there. And then once she was returned to the ship and he followed her, he was making sure he kept eyes on her all the time. Of course, the dancing in space scene, and so you're just starting to really see this commitment to each other, this, budding relationship happening. And even to the point where Eve's directive, that she chooses to change her directive to be Wally. So by the time we get to the scene where Wally's being crushed, it's already just like so welled up inside of how wonderful these two are for each other. And this is not looking good.
WALL-E has a lot of emotional moments. I may have one on my list. We'll see. But it has a ton of emotional moments, from joy to sadness to it just hits across the board. Such a good film. And that's a great moment for sure.
Yeah. In fact, it's funny because in that film, the more you watch it, the more you see maybe some of the other emotions like joy, like just the innocence of these two individuals coming together. So
very good.
Thank you.
Michelle's list is the best list. So let's get to my boring old list.
I'm looking forward to your number 5.
Well, my number 5 is a 5A and a 5B in true Hyperion Adventures podcast fashion. Yes, but they both come from the same franchise. They both come from the Inside Out franchise. And yes, there will be a spoiler for Inside Out 2 coming up here. So if you haven't seen it, well, what are you waiting for? But anyway, if you want to skip ahead, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and just skip ahead a few minutes. So I'll start with that one first, just to kind of let you get through that. Inside Out 2, that moment when they've kind of settled that panic attack, and you hear Sadness tell Joy, Riley wants you. Wrecks me.
Yeah.
It wrecks me because you went through the film and Joy wasn't sure that there was a place in Riley's life anymore at that point. She even brings it up as they're trying to figure this all out and get through it. So that moment when Sadness actually says that, and talk about joy and sadness all at the same time. It was all there right in that scene.
Yeah. And I hope I'm not messing up any of your lists here, since you're going to be talking about, it sounds like Inside Out 1 or the first one. But yeah, it's kind of interesting of a juxtaposition, because in the first film, it's joy telling sadness that, oh, I'm getting emotional, that Riley needs her to get through.
And understanding that,
Yeah.
that sadness needs to play a part in Riley's life as well.
Right.
And yes, so that is my other four, my 4A, 4B, whichever you want to call it. 5, excuse me, 5A, 5B.
I bet you have a 4A, 4B.
No, but I changed my list last moment. So it's on here as 4. I changed my list last moment. Anyway, the other one is when Riley ends up coming back from nearly running away, figures it all out, gets back, goes back, runs in, sees her parents, and then they all get into a giant group hug, and no real words need to be said there. It's just that necessary moment of family and love and everything else just all coming out at that time. It's extremely emotional and always gets me when we watch that film.
Oh, most definitely. That is an amazing scene in that film.
Yeah. So that's my number 5A and 5B. Let's go ahead and get back to the real list, though. Let's get to Michelle's number 4 favorite emotional Pixar moment.
So my number 4 came from Toy Story 3. And this is when Mr. Potato Head was temporarily a tortilla. And I literally, and when I say this literally, laughed out loud. I was roaring in laughter. I remember we were in the theater and I was just dying laughing. I thought, one, as I reflect on it, what amazing creative storytelling. But it really was great, and it brought a lightness to the film when it needed it. And I think of the multiple times that Scott has watched this, and when it gets to that scene, how it cracks him up, even though he knows it's happening, or going to happen. But yeah, when I first saw that, I could not believe how much I laughed.
That is on my list, by the way. I won't tell you where, but it is on my list, and we'll discuss that later. But yes, that scene. Yeah. I mean, when we talk about emotional, these emotions don't have to be sad or crying or anything else, unless it's crying, laughing in that one, because that is such a funny scene. When Mr. Tortilla Head versus the pigeon is just so darn funny to me. And yes, watching you crack up at it and watching Scott crack up at it, it brightens my day. I love that scene so much. Whoever wrote that and drew it up and everything else.
Oh my God.
Thank you, because it is brilliant.
It is brilliant. That's the exact word I was going to use. And I can only imagine just how much fun the creative team that was putting this film together experienced when that idea was pitched and shown and everything like that. It just had to be crazy fun.
It's so good. There's so many visual gags in it with the tortilla and everything. It is so funny. I love it. I love it so much. All right. Very good.
So we're
very
at your
good.
number 4.
My number 4. Well, I'm going to go to one of our favorite films, Monsters, Inc. for number 4. And that is right at the tail end of the film. It gets me every single time because, they get to the end of the film and they tell you, hey, the kid has to go back and we can't have you end up going back there, talking about Boo. And so they end up shredding her door, and which means that Sully can never go back. But then you get to the final scene and Mike Wazowski has recreated the door along with some help, and he gives Sully that last piece to open it up. So, you have to put in that piece yourself. Puts in that piece, opens the door, and he just hears Boo say, "Kitty." And the smile that comes across his face, it's like that just wrecks me every time because it's such a beautiful moment of joy. And next to him, there are like hand-drawn pictures of kitty cats with the same pattern kind of as Sully has on his fur. And it's just such a cute, adorable moment, as Boo is so adorable throughout this whole thing. And that just ties it up so nicely.
Agreed. Totally agree with you on that. And it is a very touching scene in that you get to experience with him the joy of seeing her again.
Yeah, because there's that sad moment that you don't think they're going to get to, when the first time you've seen it, obviously afterwards, but you don't get to see it. That you think, well, maybe that they do have to be separated, and they do have to. They're from different worlds, and
Right.
they can't be together. But that little moment of reunification is just glorious and beautiful, and I love it so much.
Exactly.
So let's get back to the real list here. Let's get to Michelle's number 3 favorite emotional Pixar moment.
Well, my number 3, and now I'm realizing I did not do A and B this time.
What?
I know.
I have you covered.
I know. I knew I could rely on you. We're just such the yin and yang.
I guess so.
But my number 3 also comes from Toy Story 3 that I was just talking about, but a totally different emotion. And that's when the toys were about to be destroyed in the incinerator. And they're all, starting to hold each other's hands. There's that really touching moment when Jessie, you could tell that she has fear in her eyes, but then she looks at Bullseye, who's kind of struggling, and she knows she kind of has to be strong for him. So she looks at him and reaches out to him, but you could tell she was trying to look at him with calming eyes of, it's okay. But then that point where Buzz stretches out his hand to Woody, that was incredibly emotional and sad. I mean, it definitely seemed like all hope was gone. I mean, I thought, wow, this is a strange way that they're going to end this film. But anyways, it was just so crazy emotional, so sad. I remember bawling again, being in the theater and remembering, boy, what a roller coaster of emotions in this film. And when we got to that point, it was like crazy. I was not ready for that.
This moment is also on my list. I'm not going to tell you where yet, but it is also on my list. But yes, they are facing their imminent doom, and the fact that they get their hands and they all reach for one another, hold hands and face it together as a family, a found family. It is such an emotional ride. It is such an emotional moment. It wrecked me too, and it still wrecks me when I see it. It's heartbreaking to think that might have been how they went out, but yet they were ready to face it together. And we belong together. That's the song says.
That's true.
And that was very much true
Yeah.
of that. So again, not going to tell you where it is on my list yet, but that is also on my list.
All right. Then my next comment, I'll hold till you're on your list.
Okay.
All right. So we're at your number 3 then, right?
My number 3, I'm going to go ahead and go to a film you've already brought up, and that's to WALL-E. And yes, it's a different moment than what Michelle talked about, but the one that always gets me in that film is, again, it's the finishing moment almost of that film when they rush to get, they get back to the planet, they get WALL-E back, and Eva is furiously looking for parts to try and fix him. And then he comes together and he just isn't WALL-E anymore. He just doesn't recognize anybody. He's just going about and doing his role as, what his directive was essentially to begin with. And then Eve goes and gives him that little shock, which is a little kiss. And then he kind of peels back and you see the eyes adjust and toot, 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 and they say, and it's WALL-E again. And it all comes out.
Yeah.
All the emotions come out of WALL-E's back because he's such a sweet little robot that you just can't help but fall in love with him. And the moment that he's back and being that sweetheart of a robot again, when it looked like it might not be there. One, it looked like he might not exist at all. And then it looked like he wouldn't be the WALL-E that we knew and loved throughout this film. And then this all happens. And it's just such a release of joy and sadness and everything else all at that same moment.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And I love how the storytelling in there, they know that we're all experiencing that very pinnacle emotion during that episode, that part of the film, I should say. And then they add that little lightheartedness where all the other,
right. Just to break it up a little bit.
Robots come and they're like, no. It's like they have to give them their space. I thought that was really creative that they did that to, kind of help like get your breath, because it is so emotional.
Yeah, it is. Oh boy, that is one that gets me every time to this day. And I've seen that movie dozens of times,
Right.
and it still gets me to this day. So that is my number 3. Let's go ahead and get back to the real list. Here is Michelle's number 2 favorite emotional Pixar moment.
Okay, my number 2, and I'm going to bet is on your list. And if it's not, I'll just be really surprised because I thought I knew you. But I'm just kidding. It comes from Coco. And it's when Miguel sings Remember Me at the end of the film. And I think we've said this before. When we went to go see the film, we had heard from other people that, it's really important you bring some tissues. And watching the film, it's a fun film. Love it. Love the characters. They're awesome characters. But I remember sitting in the theater, my mind wandered for a second thinking, why would I need tissues? This is a great film, but tissues, that's a stretch. And then once this part of the film happens, I remember like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to stop crying? Because it just was waterworks crazy. And it was just so interesting to have even thought about that during the film. Like, why would I cry? And then that scene comes up and I just cannot hold it together.
Yeah, no, that is my number 2 as well. The exact same moment, the exact same spot on my list. That is my number 2. The fact that Miguel is singing to Mama Coco and you can just kind of see the fog clearing for her. Her eyes get clear.
Spoilers there.
Yes. She starts tapping her fingers and then she starts singing, and yes, forget it. It's over. Any tears they were holding back at that point, they are gone, because that is, and then she starts talking about, remembering her father, and then the fact that Hector will be now remembered because she's telling the story of him, and she pulls out the picture of him and everything else.
Yeah.
And, it's beautiful, wonderful.
Yeah,
great.
especially that pulling out the picture too.
Yeah.
It's just
It all comes at that moment,
Yeah.
and it's all so good.
Right.
Very good. Very good. So that's my number 2 as well. So
right.
let's get back. We can go right back to the real list. Here's Michelle's number 1 favorite emotional Pixar moment.
All right, so my number 1 comes from the film Onward. And I believe I'm going to be repeating some of the things that I've said in a past episode, I think when we were maybe talking about fathers. But anyways, in the film, it's at the end of the film when Ian realizes that his older brother has really fulfilled all the things on the list that Ian had made of experiences he wanted to have with his father during this 24-hour period. And you can just see, the animators brought it through very vividly in his face, as well as, showing him reflecting on that list, that he realizes and appreciates how Barley actually was such a significant mentor and cheerleader for him all his life, and got him to, go outside his comfort zone in a lot of times, even during that experience, that journey that they were going on, where Ian was afraid to, as he was learning how to drive, merge onto the highway, and his brother is the one that really just kind of like, you could do it, you got to do it,
You got to go for it.
yeah. And just other things throughout, you could see that during his lifetime that Barley was such, like I said, a cheerleader for Ian. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And from a personal perspective, and I love my parents, we're close and everything like that, but the relationship I have with my older sister and brother-in-law kind of reminds me of that, because I think they were more instrumental at being cheerleaders for what I could do, more so than anybody else in my life. And I know everybody has somebody in their life that is that person that kind of sees more in them. And so I think I kind of related it to that as well.
Nice. Yeah, that didn't make my list, that movie, but listening to you, and I don't disagree with you. That is a very emotional moment in something that is highly impactful, and basically the entire story of the film, and it all culminates at that moment when Ian does realize it. So yeah, that's a great choice, and I know that film really affected you significantly.
Yes.
So I don't blame you for that.
Well, thank you.
Very good. Nice choice. Nice
thank
choice.
you.
The real list, of course. Michelle's list, always the
Let's
best
see
list.
your number one.
My number one, well, we've already talked about a few things, so where could they possibly end up? Well, let's just say in true Hyperion Adventures podcast fashion, I have an A, I have a B, I also have a C.
Wow.
That's because Toy Story 3 is such an emotional roller coaster that I have to go and talk about all these things. We already talked about the joy of watching Tortilla Head versus the pigeon. That is all the joy, the fear and sadness and how scary it is when the toys face their destruction in the landfill, but hold hands, and how, it's still, while that is sad, it's still heartwarming at the same time to know that they are willing to face it together. And then the third one that we have not brought up yet that always crushes me as well is at the very end of the film when Andy and Bonnie have had Andy has that one last moment of playtime with the toys for Andy and for the toys. And then Andy goes and says goodbye, goes back into the car, and he looks over, and Bonnie has, oh my gosh.
I know. I had to block that one off my list because I knew I wouldn't hold it together.
Bonnie has Woody wave to Andy, and forget it. I can't even talk about it without getting emotional. That is such an emotional, and it could have been the end of the story. I know that they're making more. They made another Toy Story film. They're making more. That would have been a really good ending to Toy Story, and I'm fine with them I have no problem with them making new films. Don't get me wrong, but that would have been a perfect finish to that film, and maybe that still is to you. It can still be to you. You don't need to watch 4. You don't need to watch 5 or 18, whatever they have coming in the future. It is a perfect moment, a perfect goodbye to Andy, and a perfect finish for that film.
I think what also brings out the emotional part in that is Andy's reaction to seeing Woody wave. So one thing, you have Woody waving, and that is symbolic, and you can feel like, oh my gosh, this is the end of who he saw as, his little boy, and all the other efforts he has made to try to rekindle time with him has just now totally been finished. And thinking, plus Woody thinking he was going to go to college with him, but to see Andy's reaction, that you could see it tugged at his heart also, made it even more emphasis on how emotional of a time it was.
Yeah, it is like I said, that movie is an emotional roller coaster. There's so much joy, so much fun, so much laughter, and yet so many heart-wrenching moments within that film. It is such a beautiful, beautiful film. The Toy Story films across the board are fantastic. And I'm going to tell you what, I talked about that's a perfect ending moment. I like Toy Story 4 more than most people do. I'm not going to say it's the best. It's not. It's not the best film in the Toy Story franchise, but I do enjoy it. That's why I don't have a problem with 4. I don't have a problem with them making more, but that could have been a perfect ending moment. I would have no problem with that as well.
Right. I mean, going back to the time where the toys were about to be destroyed, what I was thinking also was, one, how well the animators brought emotions to their faces, to the characters' faces. You could, and how there wasn't a word spoken, and yet they all felt the connection.
Right. Exactly. 100%.
So, I mean,
completely agree.
Again, we're talking an animated film.
It's amazing what these animators can do with their skills. It doesn't matter if it's hand-drawn. It doesn't matter if it's computer-generated. What they can do to bring you into these stories. It goes back to the original Snow White with Walt Disney, and people wondering, like, can you make a film, a feature-length film with animation. How will anybody, get the emotion or everything? And we've
Right.
shown movie after movie after movie that you can believe just as much in an animated character as you can in a live action actor.
Well, look what Walt did with Bambi.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's so many
Right.
instances. You can just go back and obviously we just went through a big list of several here with Pixar. Did you happen to have any honorable mentions by any chance?
I did. I had a couple. I mean, some of the things were ones that you had included, so I won't go through those again. In Finding Dory, when Dory finds the seashells and, she's following them and she finds her parents, but even more so when it's like the camera pulls back and you can see all the lines of seashells that her parents have been placing to try to help guide her on her way home. I thought was an amazing.
That's a really good one that I forgot about. That is a really excellent choice.
Yeah, it almost made my list. I thought about doing an A and B, and then I thought, I'll just leave it as honorable mentions there. In Toy Story, the first one, I think from a joy perspective of her laughter is just seeing all the toys and, well, one, that they were coming to life, but seeing things that I saw, a lot of toys that were in the bedroom that I remember growing up or my sisters having and things like that were just so nostalgic. And just found it hilarious that they were in a film like this.
Yeah, agreed completely on that. It was just like, oh, there's that toy. Oh my goodness, and that toy, and some of obviously were generic toys and others were like, oh, that is a play school toy. I had that toy.
Right.
Or like you said, your brother, your sister had that toy.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And just sometimes some of the funny lines, like when they were trying to reach down to Buzz and they were using the monkeys and they're like, we need more monkeys. And he's like, that's the whole barrel, just the tongue in cheek there about barrel of monkeys,
right.
toy.
Right. We need more monkeys. Yeah. I'll Toy Story 2, added the honorable mention of, and I think like, you're probably surprised that didn't make my list, but the moment where Jessie's retelling the story of her life as a toy before, and the sad song plays, and we all cry as we, see basically Jessie, losing her child, and then looking like she's going to give back and be able to play with her, and then being left basically, for a yard sale,
Right.
or actually for charity to be given away, donated. That's a terribly emotional moment.
Right.
That the song gets me every time, for sure. The other one, this was on my list when I was confused before, because this was on my list and I pushed it off at the last moment. It's gonna be fun because it's not a feature length; it's a short. That darn lava short. That moment where the male volcano, who is disappearing after singing for so long, wishing that he's going to have somebody with him, and the female volcano is growing up and she hears his song, and then, she gets up, she comes to life after erupting, and she's looking around for him and she can't see him anywhere. And then she starts singing, and that brings him back to life. And the lovely moment of those two volcanoes. The first time we saw that was right before, this is the short before Inside Out, if I'm not mistaken. And I knew Inside Out was going to make me emotional. And then I couldn't even make it through the darn short without crying my eyes out. I'm like, Michelle.
I remember.
No, I'm like, this is not going to go well for me.
Totally remember that. Yep. But yeah, that is a good point.
So I wonder what are your favorite emotional moments, whether it be happy, joy, laughter, sadness, fear, whatever, go through the Inside Out emotions. Which ones, strike you?
Anger.
Yes. Maybe some people will be talking about Toy Story 4 with that. I don't know, but not me. But anyway, we'd love to hear them. Please send them to us and we will share them on an upcoming show. Right, Michelle?
Exactly.
And that is a look at our 5 favorite emotional Pixar moments.